On today's show, I'm going to be talking about why the LA Clippers never go younger, why we don't play our young players. Going to be talking about it all on today's Locked On Clippers.
You are Locked On Clippers, your daily Los Angeles Clippers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, sir. You are locking in with the Clips. Thank you for making Locked On Clippers the first listen of your day, your team, every day. I'm your host, Darian Vaziri, born and raised in LA, been a Clipper fan for 20 years, been covering the team for 5 on my own YouTube channel, Dime Dropper, and 3 years right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and hit the notification bell, and you can listen wherever you get your podcasts. And this episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. In this episode, we're going to be talking about why the Clippers never play young players and the cycle that keeps continuing. I'm going to be also talking about how that ties into something very interesting that Lawrence Frank said about why it's harder for players now to earn their spot into rotations, and Steve Balmer's part in why we don't go younger. So let's begin with what I'm calling for this episode, the cycle. The cycle that we've experienced, but for the first time being a good basketball franchise. Ever since Lob City, we have been a playoff team. We have had 14 consecutive winning seasons, which is the longest active streak in basketball. Which, again, I don't like to be, it is all about winning the chip when it comes to the ultimate satisfaction. But I always say you got to appreciate the small wins. And we've come a long way to say something like that. Anybody that's been a Clipper fan even close to as long as me or longer, of course, knows exactly what I'm saying. Now, because you're a good team, you just don't get as high of a pick. That's just how the NBA lottery works. So because we haven't gotten very high picks, so like late first rounders, and when we lose in 2012, right, to the Spurs 4-0, an experienced team like that, when our second and third best players, or second and third most important players, Blake Griffin and DeAndre Jordan. The reason why I say that is because DeAndre Jordan, was he our third best player, or was it? He probably was. Caron Butler was very good, though. Like, at that time, he had a much more of a respected basketball resume. Like, if you ask people on the street, they would probably say going into that season, yeah, I'm not going to take DeAndre Jordan, a young guy that's never proven anything, over Caron Butler. But he ended up, I guess, with Chris Paul making him look better and the rim protection, you could say he was our third best player. However, he did have limitations at the end of games. But anyway, point being that we were young. We weren't expected to beat the Spurs. We weren't even expected to beat the Grizzlies going into that postseason. And, of course, we lost to the Spurs 4-0. Nobody after that season was saying, oh, yeah, the Clippers definitely need a rookie to get them over the top. Like, that's definitely not what we were saying. So when you're a team that's like a couple pieces away or years of experience away, you're not going to invest in your draft pick. And that season, we only had a second rounder anyway, so it's not even worth talking about. 2013, so we obviously pick up Jamal Crawford. We basically, before I get into more of the specifics, the point is, when we're a good team, we don't get good picks. So that's part of why we don't have a youth movement. And the fact of the matter is, these guys have not impressed the coaches, whether it be Glenn Rivers or Ty Lue, enough to break into the rotation. Hasn't impressed the front office either, because if the coaching staff said we like these guys, the front office wouldn't get guys, like experienced guys. And when you're a win-now team, and I've talked about this so much, when you're a win-now team, you got to be a really good young player to be getting into those rotations as a role player. You got to be able to guard at the NBA level. You got to be high IQ and not make dumb young player mistakes. It's hard. And you don't usually find those guys in the late first round. Now, granted, of course, there are going to be late first rounders that are good basketball players. And then we haven't hit on any of those. But we did hit on Terrence Mann, big time. I mean, he helped us have the best postseason run ever that we've had in our franchise history. And then, Amir Coffey, obviously, he doesn't have too many notable postseason moments, but he got into the rotation and helped us win basketball games. So it's not like the Clippers are super anti-playing young players. It's that the guys that we as fans might want to play because they're homegrown and we all want to see the guys that we draft succeed, those guys may need to play on a bad team to show that they're actually NBA players. Whereas Terrence Mann and Amir Coffey are very clearly NBA players. That's why they got their run. So, yes, I would like to see young players like Kobe Brown and Jordan Miller, and I would have liked to see Brandon Boston when he was here get extended burn. But giving them extended burn does not necessarily help the guys that we're investing in, the stars of this team, Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, if you go back, Blake and Chris Paul. It doesn't help them get where they want to get and where the franchise wants to get, which is as a serious playoff team, as a championship contender. And it's hard for young players unless they're very good to get into those rotations. Now, I know what some people might say. It's like, why don't you sprinkle some minutes in around the season? That's fine, but you got to be okay with losing regular season games because sometimes those stretches, you're basically playing a player that you know is not as good in the moment for long-term development, but it might come at the expense of short-term goals. And right now the Clippers are, we are planning for the long haul, but the illusion, not illusion, but it's like they're trying to multitask essentially or multi-prioritize. We're trying to go for it long-term, make a big splash in free agency, but we also want to stay competitive with it in the now. And by competitive, that doesn't mean just sit on where we were last year and not try to improve. They're showing that we want to improve. So we're doing a pretty decent job, I'd say, of balancing that right now. But the moral of the story is the young guys that everybody wants to play, including me, it's not logical. It's not logical for what the franchise wants. They're not going to just voluntarily lose games because they want to give Kobe Brown more minutes than Nicholas Batum, for example. It's not going to work. So that's the cycle. The reason why the Clippers haven't developed young guys is also a fallacy because SGA would have been developed if he had stayed. We traded him because we saw an opportunity. But it's not like the Clippers are like completely anti-playing young players. It's that the guys that so it has more to do with our drafting, if we're being honest. And the part that pisses me off is that the Clippers keep drafting like guys that spent multiple years in college that are like NBA ready and like they conduct themselves well and professionally and all this stuff that Lawrence Frank likes to say, like high character guy or whatever the hell. And I love that. Like that's great to work with. But if you're not going to play them and they're not going to get into the rotation to help a win now team, then just get the best young prospect, regardless of position. That's my take on it. It's like you keep drafting these guys that have been in the league a couple of years. If they're more NBA ready, wouldn't they be ready to get into rotations? So I think there's a problem and something to be said about our draft picks. So like, let's take a look, for example. In 2013, after we lost to the Grizzlies in the first round, Reggie Bullock was our pick. Reggie Bullock ended up having a very solid NBA career, but not with the Clippers, unfortunately. And when you look at Reggie's numbers, I mean, last season he wasn't in the league. So he had an 11-year NBA career as of now. But he had some good seasons, starting for a playoff team in New York in 2021 and then his peak was starting for the Mavericks, in my opinion. His peak season by the stats is that New York season, but if you can say you were a starter on a conference finals team, like that's pretty cool. So he ended up being a good NBA player, but he wasn't ready to in 2014. I mean, maybe he was better than a washed Danny Granger and Hito Turkoglu. I don't know. You could make the debate. He probably wasn't at the time though, and that was an older NBA. Like, you're not going to beat the Memphis Grizzlies with a young kid. Like, they're going to get punked out there. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, that Memphis Grizzlies team is not like some team that some guy from college can just come out, and if they're not like that, like, no, you're getting punked. Like, those dudes, Tony Allen, Marc Gasol, Zebo, like, they weren't messing around. It's just a different NBA back then in terms of, like, the bigs and, like, the contact with the way the game was played, like, in the experience. Like, you had really old, like, older dudes. It's a slower-paced game. So, yeah, like, that wasn't going to be – but that wasn't a bad pick, though, Reggie Bullock. And then you go to the next year. We lose to the Thunder in the second round. C.J. Wilcox. C.J. Wilcox was out of the league in 3 years, so it's safe to say we missed on that one. But coming up – so, yeah, you get the point. I mean, I can name more. Cheick Diallo, Bryce Johnson. None of these guys really had NBA careers like that. Cheick Diallo lasted 6 years. Never had a real relevant role on really any team. He played 11 minutes for the 2018 Pelicans that made it to the second round. I don't even remember it in the playoffs. Yeah, he didn't really play in the playoffs like that. Didn't play every game of it. So not a relevant part of any rotation. I loved Bryce Johnson at North Carolina, but he literally lasted 2 years in the NBA, so we missed on that one for sure. And part of it is like we didn't give these guys a chance. Like they're in an unfortunate situation where, they're late first round picks. You're not getting a situation for a win now team. And then, for Bryce Johnson, he unfortunately got traded to the Grizzlies, who were another win now team. So, he's out of the league just like that. It's a harsh business, man. The NBA is tough. And then Jerome Robinson, we obviously know we missed on that. And then SGA, where we obviously hit a home run on that. And then you have Jalen Hands, who we traded to Brooklyn, so we didn't really have him. But Terrence, home run in 2019, home run. We traded some of these picks, but Musa, Jordan Miller, unfortunately with the wave and news, who knows with him, Kobe Brown. So like these are all our picks the last couple of years. We had Jay Scrub, Keon Johnson, Brandon Boston, these guys. And we never gave them a chance because, if there was one year we could have maybe given guys more of a chance, it was 2022. But Brandon Boston did get some chances in 2022, and he played pretty well. But when, the Kawhis and the Paul Georges are healthy, it's like they're not good enough to get into that rotation. They're just not. So that's the cycle. That's why we don't play young players. It's more to do with our drafting, and it's hard for a win now team. But coming up, going to be talking about something Lawrence Frank said that was very interesting about why young guys have a harder time breaking into rotations now versus the past. I got to tell you a little something about Monarch Money. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? To be honest with you, I don't even know if I'm still paying for my YMCA. I didn't know I was paying for my YMCA membership all these months. I've been moving houses, moving locations. The YMCA that I used to go to burned down in the fires, and I didn't realize I was paying for the new one because right after the fires, I was trying to get my kids some extra gym time. So I signed up, and I forgot that I didn't take it off. And Monarch Money reminded me of that. Because Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. All right. So talking about the LA Clippers and why we never go younger, why we never have a youth movement, play the young guys. I know what people like to say, though, as I mentioned in the first segment. It's like, just because we say play the young guys doesn't mean like let me rephrase that. When they say play the young guys, they mean doesn't mean they have to be a permanent part of the rotation, but let's throw them in there sometimes. I think the Oklahoma City Thunder have done an amazing job finding a way to get guys in there, but they started by being a bad team. So they embraced the tank. See, that's something I'll talk about in the next segment. We don't really embrace the tank. But Lawrence Frank, he was talking to us at that event, that draft watch party thing. And he said that the only time really that young players have a chance to break into the rotation is training camp. And the reason why he said that is because teams just don't practice full speed anymore. If you listen to podcast P, he talks about it all the time. Steve Kerr has talked about this. I know guys that work, within the league. That it's a different world now. It's more shoot around, walk through. Injury prevention stuff is at an all-time high, which makes it crazy that we have the injury rates that we do in the league. That's a different conversation for another day. I have that conversation on Dime Dropper all the time, though. There's a lot of factors that go beyond the NBA surface, in my opinion. It's a grand, it's a theme in all of sports right now, especially I can't speak on worldwide the same way. Soccer players are injured all the time, but they play an absurd amount of games, which again, the money is the evil of everything. It's the root of everything. But in America, it's a big problem with the way our young athletes are getting injured and our professional athletes are getting injured, especially in the NBA, which is at an all-time high. But because of that, the injuries being at an all-time high and the contracts being so much that, you know how big it is to have these $1 million investments healthy and ready to go. We don't practice full speed anymore the same way. Not every team does. Most teams don't. And Lawrence Frank basically admitted that and said we don't because he said, it's not the same where you used to just like go out and practice and earn your spot in practice, which like is crazy to hear just because of what we've become accustomed to as a society in basketball. You know what I'm saying? Like as a youth coach, a high school coach, or even a college coach, like I don't know if that's happening in college. I'm not sure actually. I would have to ask. I'll ask my roommate. He played a couple years ago at Oregon, so I'll ask him. But I'm pretty sure they do though in college, man. Like well, actually, no. He tells me practice stories all the time. So I know at Oregon they went full speed. But is it a widespread thing in college with the NIL money? Are they are we not practicing full speed to prevent injury? I don't know, but I know obviously in high school and every other level in the youth levels, you're obviously allowing. There's no load management. They're not making millions, so you can still earn your spot at practice. It was just crazy to hear that young players essentially do not have that opportunity outside of training camp. You have to just wait for an injury. So like it's a tough world for a young player that's being drafted on a win now team. Like if the team that's drafting doesn't have intentions of playing you right away or playing you at any point, because I don't know, we're going to play you down the line. Like you're never safe as a player, thinking that we're going to play you down the line. You know what I'm saying? So that was a crazy thing to hear. So like, do I think that Cam Christie and these guys are going to earn their spot in training camp? Like, I think Summer League will give us a better idea of maybe how close they could be. But look at the way we're building our roster. They want vets. Like they don't want Cam Christie playing against a team like Denver next year. That's just the honest truth. It's brutal to hear, and it's unfortunate. But practice. I know we talk about practice. They don't practice the same way. So like Kobe Brown is not coming into practice saying, yeah, I'm going to take Nico Batum's spot. Like, that's what we're doing today. Like, I'm going to guard him. Like, I don't know if that's happening anymore, which sucks. I'm always a believer you have to practice hard and play hard. Like, come on, what's going on here? We're not practicing anymore. That's crazy. It's not preventing guys from getting hurt. Like, think about it. Think about it, guys. If you don't believe me, when was the last time we heard a guy got hurt at practice in the NBA? I haven't heard it in so long. It's a different world. And I understand why it's being done. I feel like the results haven't proven much. So, and by the way, I know the NBA's fast paced now and, guys have to defend more space in the half court than ever before. That's facts. But the pace thing, it's not the highest pace in NBA history. It's not the most up and down it's ever been. That, you got to, statistically, 60s, 70s, and early 80s. Most of the 80s, in fact. But I haven't binged watched 80s games, but I've seen Showtime playing. I know the pace they played at was ridiculous. And in the 70s and 60s, they all played very fast. They're up and down all the time. And don't even get me started with the conditions they were playing with. So again, that's a different conversation. But I just thought it was a very interesting conversation in the context of why young players aren't getting a chance as much, at least in our situation. It's like, yeah, going into his 2026 season, you're not having to have Kobe Brown over Nico on the depth chart. So essentially, Kobe's only chance is if Nico gets hurt. And I'm not saying I think Kobe's better than Nico. I don't think he'll ever be better than Nico, most likely. And that's not a knock on Kobe. Nicholas Batum has had an amazing career for a reason. He's in the league still for a reason. So, like, we're not going to play young guys. Sorry to say. But coming up, going to be talking about how Steve Ballmer plays a role in all of this. All right, so talking about Steve Ballmer and why the Clippers aren't ever going to, accept. Well, this is one of the reasons why we're not going to go young. Everything we've heard about Steve Ballmer and Steve Ballmer's saying to the fans during that Intuit Dome tour event that we want to be competitive. We're never going to tank, he said. We're never going to tank. We might retool similarly to how we did from Lob City to 213, but we're never going to tank. That's what Steve Ballmer said. And Lawrence always says the same thing, and that Ballmer wants to stay competitive. So the thing about staying competitive is that doesn't sound like a rebuild. And some of these younger players, they need a rebuild to play because, as I said, they're not of the level where they can slot into a win-now situation and make a difference. So the best case scenario for them is to be on a tanking team or a team that's rebuilding. You know what I'm saying? So that's part of why we don't have a youth movement either. Steve Ballmer doesn't want if he wants to continue to be competitive, I don't know if that's going to cause a rebuild or any time for young players to play. And it looks like because we don't have the picks in this next era, we're going to try to get a big fish in free agency in 2026 or 2027. And yeah, I mean, I don't know what to say, but that's the truth. So I don't expect a youth movement anytime soon. I don't expect young players to be getting a chance anytime soon, like unless there's like injuries. So the one thing that scares me though is will Balmer never be willing to go with a young team? And I think that might be something to talk about when it comes to if Balmer's never, sometimes you got to accept being bad for a little bit to then be good again or to be great again. And you've seen that with OKC. You saw that with Boston in between the Big Three era and the Jays era. You know, you saw Denver in between the George Karl days and the years leading up to Jokic. Milwaukee had some rough years. That's why they got Jabari Parker in the draft, second overall. So a lot of these teams, you know, they struggled before they could succeed. And Steve Ballmer has never accepted that. You know, he's had a winning season every season as an owner. And the thing that scares him, for me, this is my opinion. We're in LA, a market that supports winners. Or should I say, you know, Clipper fans aren't like this, but LA in general, like they love stars. You know, they love the big names. When we had that 2018-19 team that Clipper fans love, we weren't selling out every night like Lob City or when Kawhi's healthy. Clipper fans loved it, but we weren't selling out every night. Business-wise, the Clippers Steve Ballmer wants the building to be sold out every night. And having stars on the roster is relevant. When Kawhi plays consistently, we always sell out. Lob City, we had years, multiple seasons in a row of sellout streaks. So my thing is, it's not a big deal to not have a star for a couple years. Like maybe we don't sell out every game, but we're going to be there. Like attendance is not going to be terrible. In the beginning of this season, the attendance wasn't great. And I get it. That's what James Harden on the team. Maybe they're afraid that without him, nobody will show up. Like no one's going to show up to watch Jordan Miller and Musa and a bad team. You know, we haven't seen the Clippers be proper bad in a while. Like it's been because 2011 we had Blake Griffin that was the number 1 overall pick. So like that's not the same as what we're suggesting with these players. Like yeah, play Jordan Miller more. Let's play Kobe Brown more. Like youth movement. Like let's trade everybody. Which again I've said at times in the spur of the moment I've been so mad. I'm just like I trade everyone. I'd rather have this than Kawhi always injured. But in terms of what's smarter for the Clippers, like because I don't know what the market value is for Kawhi and Harden or Zoo, like what kind of picks are you getting back? What young players are teams willing to part with? You know what I'm saying? Like, are people going to come to watch Jonathan Kuminga? Let's say we made a trade with the Warriors. Jonathan Kuminga led Clipper team. Like, what's the attendance going to be? I know Balmer's afraid of that, especially when you're dealing with being the secondary team in your market. So when you're wondering why won't Balmer tank, right now it's because we don't have picks. But philosophically, I don't think he ever wants to be in a position where he has low attendance because he knows we're the second team in the city. And maybe that's part of the reason we go after stars, even if they're washed up, for the name value, for the brand. I don't deny that that could be a thing. Yeah, let's get John Wall. Let's get Boogie. Let's get Russell Westbrook. Let's get James Harden. You know, big name. Let's go get Beal. Let's go get CP3 back. You know, people love these guys. These guys have stands. So I don't know. The thing is, for me, Balmer might need to swallow his pride a bit eventually. Not now because we don't have the picks, but eventually, and I hope Balmer's the owner for the rest of my life, or the rest of his life at least. I hope I live longer than Balmer. But that's the truth. He might have to swallow his pride at some point and admit being bad. It's not the end of the world. Look, we have grown as a fan base more than, like, we're a bigger fan base now than we ever were with Sterling, right? The fan base is only growing. And I get success helps you grow, and the Intuit Dome will help you grow your fan base, for sure. No doubt about it. But in 10 to 15 years, you're going to see a different sort of LA landscape in terms of the fandom. It's not going to be our city. The Lakers are still going to dominate the majority of fans, of course. But there's going to be a lot of the kids, or should I say the adults, that were kids during Lob City that are now adults and they're having kids. And it's just not going to be as one-sided as it once was. Because I'm going to be honest with you, like the kids that I coach, they never even saw Kobe without a torn Achilles. So the only thing they've experienced is a bubble title, which honestly is like, you can have that like over me. Like I don't care. Like I don't think you've experienced that much better than me, to be honest with you, as a Laker fan in your time. You didn't watch Kobe, so like you didn't watch Magic. You watched LeBron, who's like not even a better Laker than James Worthy or Elgin Baylor or any of those. Like he's not even a top 7-8 Laker. He never won a championship in front of the fans. So like I ain't jealous of Laker fans that are kids. No, hell no. And I'm not jealous of Laker fans in general because I could have been a Laker fan if I wanted to, and I'm not, for a reason. You know, I have my story. But of course, you know, when they were winning in my childhood and I saw Gasol and Kobe, I was like, man, did I make the right decision? You know, at that time, I was like, I may have made a mistake. Of course, I thought that. But now I don't regret a thing, obviously, and I stuck with the Clippers through it all. But that's a thing sometimes, is you got to be bad before you get good. And I feel like Balmer thinks because we're in LA, you don't even have to go through that. You can just be attractive as a destination and stars will just come to you. But there's nothing like that homegrown star that you see grow up and end up doing it, like Jokic, like Tatum, like Curry, like Giannis. And that's what we loved in Blake. So I still dream of one day we get a homegrown star. But that's what scares me. For those that agree with me, is Balmer ever going to let it happen? I don't know. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at DimeDropperPod. Subscribe to my own YouTube channel, Dime Dropper. And you're going to want to subscribe now because Summer League content, first time being media credentialed, in less than 7 hours, I will be in Las Vegas. 7 hours of me talking right now, not when you're listening to this episode. I'll probably be in Vegas when you're listening. Summer League. I'm excited. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at DimeDropperPod. Subscribe to my own YouTube channel, Dime Dropper, for all the Summer League stuff. And, of course, Locked On Clippers, live from Vegas. Who knows who we could have on the show? The age-old proverb continues. Go Clippers.